Welcome to Home Health 360, a podcast presented by AlayaCare. I'm your host, Jeff Howell, and this is the show about learning from the best in home health care from around the globe. Hey, and welcome to another edition of Home Health 360, where we speak with leaders in home care and home health from across the globe. Today's guest is an OG at AlayaCare. Kevin Mistry has spent time in the home health software market in Canada, the US, and Australia as Director of Sales for AlayaCare, and he's now ventured into a home care-based micro rewards company called Caribou Health as the VP of Sales. Kevin, great to see you again, and welcome on the show.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Tell me a little bit more about yourself and what's led you to this point, Kev.
Like you said, I spent a lot of time at AlayaCare, but maybe I'll go back in time a fair bit on what led me to that role and what led me to Caribou right now and into this industry. So, I've heard the stories about how a lot of people get into senior care. A lot of them have been touched by, a loved one that requires a service or something like that. I actually don't have that type of story, but I do have a slightly different one. So this is going back quite a while, but really my experience is more in the agency recruitment space. Way back in school, I took economics in school, and I still, live by supply and demand economics for most things. And back then I realized I started an agency, a recruitment agency of my own, but quite different to anything that most of your listeners would have heard of. But I started a rent-a-goalie company way back, probably 20 years ago. I was an ice hockey goalie myself.
How to spot the Canadian, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's very Canadiana. But I was a goalie myself. If anybody plays hockey that's listening out there, they know that goalies are tough to come by. And so I kind of picked up on this, and I guess the capitalist in me started to charge for my services. And that became really popular. I needed another goalie, and I built up this little business in my 20s to about 100 goalies playing games all over the Toronto area mainly. And that was my first kind of foray into agency work. I had no idea where that would bring me later on. But I then got into the recruitment space, staffing agencies, working in-house as a recruiter. So agency work, matching up supply and demand was my world for a while. That eventually led me into this senior care space. I realized with that background, senior care was an industry that the same sort of dynamics were in place like goalies. There's a high demand for the product and not much supply. So it got me, that's what really interested me in this space. I spent a lot of time then at AlayaCare. One of my last roles was really diving deep into that supply and demand mismatch problem. And then I came upon this company, Caribou, which I really thought was offering something very new to that specific problem. And it just got me really, really interested, started to dig a little bit more into the problems that we'll talk about later and the solutions they had for it. And I just kind of fell in love with this little program. And it reminds me a lot of when we started AlayaCare. It's a smaller group right now, but really tackling a very fundamental problem in a really unique way. And so anyways, that's kind of what led me to this point, the long version.
And I'll shout it out right now. It's caribou.care. Love the domain. I guess caribou.com was probably taken.
Yeah.
So it's caribou.care. So Kevin, what's your view on caregiver shortage? Why does it exist in senior care?
Yeah, I mean, probably most of your listeners already know a lot of this information. But at the end of the day, I mean, senior care it's a really hard job, right? It's not glamorous. It's a tireless type of role. And that was before COVID even happened. So you put COVID on top of that. And I mean, it was really a perfect storm when it comes to why these shortages have now come to be. And, a lot of times in the past, these types of roles. We've relied on foreign trained professionals coming over. COVID put a damper in that. So, the last 2-3 years, we haven't had those workers immigrating to our centers. And that's really hit us hard. Like, that's the reality of this type of work. So there's a lot of things. I mean, at the end of the day, also specifically in home care. I mean, healthcare has been hit really hard. I mean, the whole economy obviously has been hit really hard. There's a supply shortage everywhere. But then you look at healthcare because of COVID has been hit even harder. And then you really drill down into home care specifically. And I think we've suffered the most from the market dynamics that exist right now. And that's why, again, it really interests me because it's such an important job. We absolutely have to solve this problem. People have to do this work. So we need to find these people one way or the other.
Yeah, I saw some data as well recently with the Great Resignation and people reevaluating and changing careers. The home care industry had such a small influx of new people as well. And, almost sort of at the very bottom of any industry that's out there, unfortunately.
Yeah, it can't go on like this. We got to figure this out.
So you folks try to go about this not on a macro level, but on a micro level. So what's your view of the world of how we can go about trying to help solve for caregiver shortage?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly go about it from a micro level, but we look at it obviously at the macro problem. We can't fix that macro problem. We know this supply shortage exists. But then we start thinking, okay, what kind of new ideas can we come up with to fix it? And for us, it has been an incentives program. So we look at it in 3 kind of pillars, right? There's the recruitment side of it, there is the retention side of it, and there's the actual performance end of things. So how we've come up with our framework is we want to incent micro behaviors. So when we look at just recruitment, for example, there are referral programs out there that try to encourage referrals, but they only kind of reward the end result, right? A new person starting, which is great, and obviously the main component to it. But we can really boost that effort by rewarding the behaviors that lead to that outcome. So things like when you're talking about recruitment and referrals, it's sharing, having care workers share their jobs on social networks, sending it to a friend, things like that eventually lead to the referral. So we reward that type of behavior. And then even inside the recruitment lens, when I talk to a lot of our clients and people in this industry, it's so difficult to just get people through the recruitment cycle, from posting a job to interviews to then getting them through training, submitting their background checks, and then just getting them to work their first shift. If you can get over that mountain, the person is a much higher chance of staying with the company. So even rewarding them through that process, we've been thinking about, as they complete training, as they submit their background checks, when they work their first shift, they can get these micro bonuses through that process. And if we can even, just that alone, if we can solve, gets us to a much better place. But then also once they're hired, the retention piece, recognizing them for a job well done, having service milestones. So once they work a month, 3 months, 6 months, rewarding them for those smaller achievements. Again, in the past, people sometimes have had these retention milestones, but they tend to be after a year, after 5 years, which is great, obviously. But the reality is these days that if we can just get these people past the initial hurdles of taking their first shift, being with the company for a month, 2 months, then again, we reap the benefits down the line. So it's those kinds of smaller incremental rewards that we really think we're seeing a lot of ROI from. And then just to finish off that thought, our last pillar, so recruitment, retention, and then on the performance end is really where it gets, I think, a lot of fun and really interesting. And our clients are coming up with a lot of different ideas on how we can reward smaller things that just lead to big outcomes. So, things like working more hours in general. I mean, we need more capacity. We need people to be working more. So just if they work a certain amount of hours, rewarding them for that, incenting them to take harder to fill shifts. I mean, I know even from back in my goalie rental days, at the end of the day, as a scheduler, you spend 80% of your time filling, those 20% of hard to fill shifts. If we could help that would be huge. So
those midnight games in the middle of nowhere, that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And then we, filling out, completing surveys, whatever it is that a company is having difficulty with when it comes to their field staff, we can start to brainstorm and think about a way to incentivize that behavior through the overall rewards program.
Got it. Yeah, and I love the idea of front-end loading the dopamine hit of getting 500 points for celebrating your 1 month anniversary.
I mean, that's the thing these days. It's not about them staying for a year and 5 years. Like, let's just get them past that 3 month mark.
Right. What would you say are the top use cases that you're seeing your clients implement?
I mean, the recruitment end is the easiest to see the ROI on right away. So most of our clients are using us for recruitment and to get better referrals. Most companies realize that referrals tend to be their best source of hire, not necessarily the highest volume, but the ones that are retained longest, that perform the best, tend to be referrals. So if we can improve that number, they're quite happy. So that's usually one that's adopted pretty quickly. And then also the retention things like milestone bonuses, people have been really, really liking. We're still fairly new in our short history, about a year and a half old. So we're getting to those more performance-based rewards, like what we call power hours. So just increasing capacity, getting people to work more in general is something that people are really starting to look at more now.
And overall, how would you say it's all working? How's it all going? Do you have some clients that have some really good, ROI or case studies that you can speak of?
Yeah, I mean, early signs have been really, really good. Like I said, the referrals end, which is probably the reward that people adopted first, have seen incredible ROI. And then even on I talked about filling hard to fill shifts. Just recently, we had a customer interview with one of our larger Canadian clients, and the manager there was saying might get this quote slightly wrong, but basically short-term shifts or short notice shifts that used to take them a long time to fill are now gobbled up in less than 10 minutes. Like that's the one that I've been really hit hard with me, and I think has been a huge feather in our cap that we can start to affect those things. But like I said, referrals, have exponentially gone up in the early ROI business cases that we've done.
And those hard to fill shifts, how easy is it for someone to define what that is? Because my mind went to evening and weekend shifts, but then you raise a good point of the last minute sub in for somebody else kind of a shift. How easy would it be for the coordinator or administrator or whoever's trying to offer up the incentive? How automated is this? Is it just like baked right into a certain type of visit code? Or I'm imagining there's a simple way that it's set up so it's not creating any more work for the office staff.
Yeah, good topic to bring up, because the automation part is pretty key for us. I mean, there have been rewards programs in the past, but the reason that a lot of them fail is that we can't put anything more on the coordinator's laps. Really, they're already super, they have a high workload. They're already stressed enough. So for these rewards to work, we really try to take it out of the hands of the coordinator and automate things as much as possible. So there's a couple of different ways that we've been looking at it from the point of view of filling hard to fill shifts, because you're right, there's different things. There's short notice shifts, there's evenings and weekends, there's shifts that are far away from your location and require higher drive time. So because of that, there's different ways for each one, but we are really big on integrating with the back-end system. So obviously AlayaCare, we've had a partnership for a little while. HHA Exchange has now come on board as well. So we integrate with the back office systems to digest this information. So it could be because of a certain service code that a scheduler puts on it because it's an evening shift. It could be a tag. It depends on how the back office system works. But even if we don't have an integration into the back office, we still can digest a payroll report as well to get most of our rewards. So there's a few different ways, but we like to at least try to default towards an integration mapping so that it takes the onus off of the coordinator. Because if we keep, maybe for the short term, if we're experimenting with a certain type of reward, it might require a little bit more manual intervention by a scheduler. But if we want these rewards to work over the long term, then we need to automate it in some way.
Right. Got it. And you guys must be developing your own best practices where you can say, hey, what other agencies have done is they've defined an undesirable shift. If it's on a Saturday or Sunday, automatically assign 50 points. And if the point of sending that offer to the caregiver versus the time of the shift starting is less than 24 hours or less than 48 hours, add another 100 points to it, something like that. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. And once the caregivers start depending on it in that way, that's when we really start seeing the most bang for your buck. When they start really looking at it as part of their compensation, they know every time that this, I fill a weekend shift, I know I'm going to get these points. And they count on it, and it becomes a differentiator for the agency.
And I'm curious how far you can take this. So can this be baked into, a progress note or checking off your activities of daily living or reading a care plan? I'm really curious about all the potential use cases that not just to promote better behavior from an operational standpoint, but from a clinical one as well.
Yeah, I mean, it really gets very interesting. I just had a meeting about this on all the different possibilities here when it comes to the clinical aspects of filling in care notes, completing your ADLs. It gets to be a lot of fun. It's a bit hard actually to keep us reined in and concentrating on just the ones that we know are delivering high ROI right now. But the sky's the limit in terms of what we'd like to do in the future. But it also depends. Again, we want to make sure that things are automated, that doesn't put any onus on the coordinators. So we've got to hold back a little bit. But there's a ton of different rewards that we could start playing with.
Yeah, I mean, strictly the referral piece, especially if your clients are getting an incredible ROI right now, that in itself is a huge win. And it's so exciting to hear about your ability to bake in points that is so niche and specific to our industry, whereas large established reward companies are very industry agnostic, and they would never be able to tie into systems and automate points for caregiver specific activities.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. Our industry, we are just so much more hard up. This problem is just is amplified so much more that I think there's a lot of room for us just in home care, or at least senior care for now. We'll see what the future brings, but it's such an acute problem in this specific industry that has so many nuances of its own that, we're really bullish on it.
And can you describe to me what the mechanism is? I'm imagining a few different potential ways that the caregiver can get their rewards. One would just be straight cash added to their paycheck. Another would be some kind of automated email with a gift card. And then the third potential way is they have some kind of portal to log into, and they can kind of do some shopping there or whatnot. But I'm just curious if there's multiple ways, or if you guys have a one standard way that you get that compensation in the hands of the caregiver.
Yeah, I mean, you get it. It's similar to other reward programs that way. So there is a cash bonus that can be put on their paycheck. And then there's gift cards, pretty much. But the gift cards these days can be something that's very close to cash, like a Visa gift card or a gas gift card are the two ones that are probably most popular. But I think the key component here, like I really try to steer clients away from just doing a cash reward on their paycheck, because if the incentive dollars just get lumped into payroll, you see less effect from that reward. It's keeping them separate, or I mean, even if they did want to make it cash, they have to somehow distinguish it from regular pay. And that's how you get more. For every dollar you put into a rewards program, you basically get more productivity than every dollar you put into payroll. So you really want to distinguish the two. And so gift cards do tend to be a better way of doing things because it's easier to distinguish the two. Even though sometimes, some of our clients might want to put it into cash, or caregivers might think, cash is king. But what we've seen is just you do get more bang for your buck by distinguishing them. And so gift cards is a great way to do it.
Yeah, there's something in particular about the dopamine you get with a gift card where it just feels like it's free and it's fun, right? It's money that you now want to go spend.
That's the thing. It's just something extra, right? That's not wages. And this is also the thing that's interested me for a long time, but just non-monetary compensation, although this can be quickly tied to money if it's a gift card, but still not your regular payroll. Even, way back, another story from my past, but I used to work on some cruise ships down in Toronto Harbor. And I remember our boss used to give us free beer. I mean, we were in our early 20s and we got a couple beers after work. And like just how far that used to go in motivating us was incredible. Like I couldn't believe the stuff that he would make us do, but we loved the job because of that small extra gesture. And so, I mean, in your 20s, getting a couple beers is really big. But for a healthcare worker, a home care worker, getting a gas gift card is the same type of thing with gas prices the way they are.
Right. Yeah, I mean, nobody helped any friend move over a case of pop, but a case of beer, you're in.
Yeah, for sure.
So how do you guys factor in your pricing? How does that all work?
Yeah, so I mean, we're a SaaS platform. We have a SaaS fee that ends up being, somewhere between $2 to $3, something like that, depending on the size of the company. And then there's the actual reward amounts that the company wants to dole out. That's obviously the bulk of it. I mean, at the end of the day, it depends on the reward types, how involved the company wants to get in this type of program. But in general, what it usually ends up being is something like 0.5 to 1% of an agency's payroll could be allotted to compensating and incenting caregivers in this way. So it's a pretty small amount of overall payroll. But again, if you want to get bigger, we're more than happy as a company. And like I said, it's quite clear that every dollar that you put into an incentives program like this just gets you a lot more ROI than a straight raise of the same amount, 0.5%. Most companies are increasing salaries by 5%, 10% a year lately. And it only necessarily gets you a certain amount of added productivity versus this, you can very easily see how it ties to increased motivation, increased productivity, better outcomes.
I love it. And I love how you guys are creating your case studies of what was the state before, and then you came in, and then you come up with the best practices of, for every referral, you get 500 points. If they get hired, you get 1,000 points. If that person stays for a month, you get another 1,000 points. Coming up with all kinds of different ways to rack up all of your rewards and getting right down to those micro actions during the shifts. Like there's constantly a way for you to be scoring points. Everyone loves gamification.
Yeah, it's the future. I mean, and that's another key part of it that I talk about as well, is just the importance of having multiple reward types contributes to the consistency over time. If you just do referrals and then end it there, great. It helps for referrals, but caregivers don't necessarily look at it as part of their compensation or as a big perk of working for that company. You have to be changing things and adding rewards over time, which is great because you're just seeing, more benefits because every reward is tied to a specific behavioral benefit to the company. But that's a pretty key component because we want to make sure that it's consistent over time and that caregivers look at it as part of their compensation. And that's where you get the most efficiency.
Well, Kevin, I'm sorry you didn't think of this when you were running Rent-A-Goalie, and you could have recruited hundreds of more goalies and points tied to their shutouts or showing up on time. And
it's funny, both AlayaCare and now Caribou, I could have tied to Rent-A-Goalie, oddly enough. It's amazing how that came full circle.
Yeah. And by the way, I'm assuming that you guys would entirely qualify for FMAP and any state-specific funding. I don't see why this is not right up your alley.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I mean, that's where we're concentrating the most effort right now is the states that are using FMAP funding more heavily. So New York, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts are really our bread and butter right now because a lot of our clients are just using the FMAP funding, and it 100% Caribou 100% qualifies for that funding. So it makes it a much easier decision that way as well.
Oh, it's win-win. Yeah.
The beauty of it is that it's a program where most of the money that you put into it is going directly to the front line through those FMAP funds, which is great to see.
Yeah. Well, I'll get you out of here on this. We mentioned the website in the beginning. I'm assuming people can go to the website. What do they do next?
Yeah, I mean, they can go to the website. So caribou.care. They can contact me, Kevin@caribou.care. All the usual channels, LinkedIn, everything like that. We're trying to put a lot of content out there. We're going to start putting more content out there. And we're on the trade show circuit as well. So we usually have a booth at most of the association trade shows. So come say hi if you're around.
Well, speaking of which, I look forward to seeing you in person at our user conference next week. And it sounds like you guys are up to some really exciting things. So I look forward to seeing the software a little bit more in action. And thanks for coming on today.
Thank you. See you next week.
Home Health 360 is presented by AlayaCare. First off, I want to thank our amazing guests and listeners. To get more episodes, you can go to alayacare.com/homehealth360. That's spelled Home Health 360, or search Home Health 360 on any of your favorite podcasting platforms. The easiest way to stay up to date on our new shows is to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. We also have a newsletter you can sign up for on alayacare.com/homehealth360 to get alerts for new shows and more valuable content from AlayaCare right into your inbox. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.